and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're next going to do a roll call of the members that are present. Michael Croto, the chairman, is not here tonight. My name is Kimberly Queen, and I'm the vice chair.
Okay, Stevens, member.
Ron Stevens, alternate.
Tony Tarecki, clerk.
James Buffetti, member.
Joshua Smith, member.
Curtis Sampson, alternate.
All right, let's see if we need to do any appointments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have enough for a quorum. Would you have a conflict with number 2 because of the volume of information, right? Okay, so we're not going to have you vote. Is it all right if we have another alternate vote if you would like to? Would you like to be part of this meeting tonight? All right, so it'll be 6, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay.
So you appoint Curtis?
I'm going to appoint Curtis Sampson. Yep. Next, we're going to ask if there's any public input on non-agenda items. Non-agenda, come on up.
Charbonneau, I live at 401 Charles Bancroft Highway, and I'm here about Mel's again. So as you all know, they're open for the season, and when we went through all the parking things with them last year and where they were going to park, and they could eliminate parking because they had plenty. If you drove by any of the past few weekends, they're parking all over the lawn. They were parking up against the road. Some of the town officials have gotten on them. They're getting better. Now they're parking where they have their box trailers. So there's a house right directly across from the Laserplex. They have a lot next to that. They're parking. They just started parking out there this weekend. That's not in any site plan anywhere for them to be able to do that, but they're parking out there now. So they're not, there was people walking across the street from that parking lot, which they agreed to put in a sidewalk, which they've never finished, because the question is, well, was a sidewalk for the bumper boats, or was it for Spooky World, or whatever? But in any case, they have people walking down the side of the road again from that parking lot, which is south of the house across from the Laserplex. I don't know of a business in this town, including my own businesses, that would be allowed to blow. I know we don't have a noise ordinance, but who would be allowed to blow off cannons in all hours of the night and get away with it. I mean, it's not right. It's just not right. I mean, I know we don't have a noise ordinance, but why should they be allowed to do that? And I'm told because we don't have a noise ordinance. So I guess my point for this is, I understand that they're going to be coming back to the board to get rid of carnage and some other things that they want to change on the site plan. I think they've demonstrated to everybody that they tell this board what they want to hear, and then they do what they want. So I know I will be here and my attorney will be here when they come, but I think it's pretty critical that every dot is I'd and every T is crossed with them, because they do what they want. They come in and tell you guys what you want to hear, and they do what they want, and they seem to be getting away with it. We push for renderings. Somehow it slipped through the cracks, and the building inspector gave them a permit for Texture 111, and we've gone through this already. But somehow we have to reel them in. And as a neighbor, is having to drive through there. I mean, I was coming home Saturday night and a car's turning into the street, and he just decided to turn right in front of me. He just was turning in there and turned right back out because the traffic's out of control. They say they don't need a traffic study. I think if they had a traffic study when Spooky World's going on, it'd be a lot different than when you're trying to do it when Spooky World's not going. I mean, I'm sure you've all driven by there. And, you know, it's like having the police cruisers there. I think it's important to have the police cruisers. But I think anybody that drove through there and the blue lights are flashing, it's hard to see people when they're walking all over the place. I mean, and that's what they're doing. They're walking all over the place. So just if and when they do come back, I think it's critical that everything is pinned down to exactly what they want and how it's going to be, because they just do what they want. And they did it through the whole project. And unfortunately, in some of their defense, past building inspector let them get away with it, as far as I'm concerned. And you saw that when you did the site walk, when you went out there, and there's buildings that were out there that weren't even on the site plan. So I think it's critical that everything is documented very well for the future. All I got. Thanks.
May I say something? This is a reoccurring problem. Do we have to get this to maybe in front of the Board of Selectmen to find out what the procedure is of why we're approving things on site plans? We're supposed to follow certain rules, and if there's something's not happening between us and code enforcement or something like that, or they're getting permits or they're ignoring whatever the notes are on our approval of plans. So I'm not sure if it's just a Litchfield problem or is there some process falling down, but maybe at least start a meeting on how to start looking into this.
I can guarantee you that if that place was in operation in any other town, there would be a lot more issues go flying around, and they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They just wouldn't.
This
be.
isn't just related to Spooky World, but just some process between planning board, code enforcement,
For every
for
business.
those notes. Yeah.
For every
For every-
business.
for
It doesn't
everybody.
matter, for every business.
But it seems like something's failing, at least what we're seeing here.
I mean, certainly approaching the selectmen is one option.
I don't know. I'm just trying to say, try to get a
Yeah.
meeting together with the parties or find
I mean,
a
I
general
would-
process with the board, or maybe handle it with Spooky World. And
I would say, though, the board has it's within the powers of the board to hold a compliance hearing to determine whether or not the conditions of approval that the board placed on the project have been adhered to. That's something
Can
that
do that.
the board does have that authority.
are you trying to do just Spooky World, or just you want something general?
Well, I think it's Spooky World, but it leads into the other things. I mean, they need to make sure they're in compliance with everything that they're doing. Not just Spooky World, but that whole place.
You want the short term to be the Spooky World issue, and the long term to maybe find out why things are not communicated
I mean,
properly.
it's not my call. It's just to the extent that the board has approved an application. That application involved conditions that the board. It's within the authority of the board to do hold hearing if they wish to determine whether or not those conditions have been adhered to.
When that's triggered, and again, I'm sorry if I'm asking general questions the first time here. If that happens in other towns, why would the planning board all of a sudden initiate that? Did they notice it personally, or did some kind of complaint come in?
I mean, it could be based on a complaint or observation on the board or anybody else in the town, but it also simply could be a matter of procedure, because the conditions that were placed some of the conditions that were placed on the application were conditions that were not to have been implemented until sometime down the road, tied to occupancy permit, et cetera. So it's certainly to revisit, well, I shouldn't say revisit, but to hold a hearing to determine whether those conditions have been met is something that the board could do if the board wishes to
Especially
do
with the
that.
parking, with that cornfield
Right.
in the back.
Because at some
They were
point, there
supposed
has
to
to
be
be
using-
a determination as to whether the site plan is in compliance with the conditions.
Yeah, does the
Well-
planning board trigger that? Do we
Absolutely.
reach out to,
The planning board could trigger that, yes.
how long do they have to respond? Say we're focusing on Spooky World short term. How, if we had a letter drafted,
Well, it would be a noticed hearing. So it would be a hearing that the board holds on compliance with the site plan that would be fully notified.
Can I ask, wouldn't we need to know what conditions were not being complied with? I mean, it seems to me that there should be a complaint. There should be a listing of those conditions that have not been met. There should be an investigation of whether or not those conditions in fact have not been met. And then there should be a hearing. So
Well-
to proceed to a hearing without the investigation, it doesn't seem to give the board enough information.
It's not an enforcement action. It's simply holding a hearing to determine whether or not the conditions have been met. That allows the applicants to come forward and say, this is what's been done. It allows any abutter, any member of the public to speak. It's not an enforcement action. It's simply a determination as to whether or not the conditions have been met.
And so if in fact they came in and the board determined that the conditions had not been met, what happens then? What does the board do?
Well, then there are different steps that the board could take. It could be, defer to the town as an enforcement issue. It could be a revocation of the approved site plan, which is something that the board could do. It could be that the applicants seek to amend the application. So there's no one course. There's any number of courses. It also could be that the board determines that conditions have been satisfied.
Sure. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that this board doesn't have any enforcement authority.
Correct.
And so who does?
The town hasn't. Well, a step that the board can take is a revocation of an approved plan if it ever rose to that. But beyond that, no, the planning board is not an enforcement body.
So who would have it? Would that be the police?
No.
Who would have
That-
enforcement authority?
The town has code enforcement. That would be the.
So the
authority
code
would be
enforcement
code enforcement.
officer, we have one in this town?
I honestly, I'm not sure what the status currently is of that
Troy is
position.
the acting.
And then, and that person can issue citations for violations? Is that how it works?
Well, that individual would take appropriate enforcement action, I'm sure, in consultation with the town's attorney, and I would imagine the selectman.
But that would probably end up with the select board, right?
Well,
At the end of the day.
The code enforcement officer is the individual who's empowered to take action. I mean, again, I'm sure, one, we have to assume, you would have to assume that there is some violation for which action is required.
Right.
And I would think in part that would be determined by the nature.
So has this been referred to the code enforcement officer?
Yes.
Is he aware of your complaints?
Yes.
And that person has not taken any action as far as you know?
They've taken some action, yes. So for instance, the parking all over the lawn.
Yeah.
This past weekend, they weren't parking all over the lawn, but now they're parking in a lot that's not approved.
Okay. But
So-
I mean, I go by there on Friday night trying to get home and there are usually 2 police cruisers there.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
They're directing the people walking across the
But if
street.
there are people that are parking where they shouldn't be,
The-
shouldn't they be able
The
to?
police department doesn't enforce a site plan. The fire department doesn't enforce a site
No,
plan.
but if they're parking on someone's private property,
Well-
should they be able to, it's an act of trespass at that
They're,
point?
they're parking on their own property. So, but they're not parking what's approved on they're not parking where it is approved on the site plan.
I see.
Okay, so they're parking up on their property on the grass that abuts 3A. So the cars couldn't even pull over. Cars were pulling over, but they couldn't pull over because the cars were pulled up to close to the edge of pavement. So now you have to drive around the cars that are pulled over because they don't know where to go. And it's out of control.
Right, but so if there's a traffic problem on that road because the cars can't get by, again, wouldn't the police department have the authority to intervene?
They can tell the car that pulled over to keep going.
They can have a car towed.
Well, but the car
Park where
didn't
it shouldn't
park
be if
there.
it's
He
obstructing
just,
traffic.
but the car is parked on Spooky World's property. The cops aren't there to enforce a site plan. They are making sure that the people are walking across the road and traffic's moving. But if they're not there to enforce the site plan, my complaint is they're not abiding by the site plan that was approved. When they came, I don't remember if you were on the board when they came for the bumper boats.
Yeah.
Okay, so they eliminated 50 parking spaces because they had too many.
Yeah.
Okay, but now they're parking on the lawn because they eliminated the parking spaces. I guess, I'm not sure. So that's some of the things that are happening. No different than when the argument is the carnage, this thing they call carnage, which is a bunch of dumpsters piled up, that's a haunt.
Mhm.
So they came in because I had filed a complaint and we negotiated that they were going to put a fence up. I said, okay, so we'll go away with our complaint. They didn't put the fence up. Carnage is still there because the question came was that fence part of the bumper boats being approved or is it part of Spooky World? There's a gray area there. Okay, so not sure. No different than putting barn board. I didn't tell them to put barn board on those pavilions. That's what they came up with. They got a permit to use texture 111. Not the same. That's why when we were going through the process, I always pushed for a rendering. Show us a rendering. I didn't tell them to put barn board. That's what they proposed. Show us a rendering of what you're going to do. That's what's required in the site plan. They could have shown texture 111. I was going to push against that because it doesn't meet the character of the area. That's what they came up with, something to meet the character of the area. That's what they agreed to do. They didn't do that. They knew it. It was on the site plan. We had a temporary building inspector at the time. They convinced him that it was okay. He gave it to him. So that was cracked because we didn't have a building inspector. Again, they were supposed to put fences up at the end of Colby Road. They took down the old fences that are on the site plan. They never put them up. Is that part of Spooky World? Those fences were for Spooky World. But they say it's tied to the bumper boats being approved.
I believe all the conditions of approval were tied to their certificate of occupancy for the bumper boats. But I mean,
But they were going to build
should
this
have
right
been done
away.
right months and months ago.
We were
So
going
I
to get
can
it done right
understand the issue.
away.
Wasn't done,
And,
yeah.
and so now all they did is delay it, so they didn't have to do that.
So,
And here we are.
so we as a planning board agree to something's going to happen on these site
Yeah.
plans.
So when they,
And then it leaves our realm at the moment,
Right.
right? And then we have code enforcement office or downstream if some complaint comes in. But what's in between for any check and balance? Or I don't know if there's even a rule for that in any town, never mind just
I think
Litchfield.
besides the barn board, I don't think there's anything that they're technically doing out of
The parking,
compliance.
they're supposed to use the cornfield.
Oh, right, yes,
right?
the parking on the property, they don't have permits for that.
if they followed what's on the site
Right.
plan, I wouldn't be here complaining because that's what we all agreed to, but they're not doing that. Some things they are, some they're not. You know, they could have got the sidewalk paved, but they didn't. They could have, there's things that they could have done.
And they weren't supposed to be crossing on Colby Road over either, was the other,
They're
Right.
supposed
And
to be
they
parking
didn't-
on
especially at
Colby
night.
Road.
Right, they weren't supposed to be parking on the streets up there.
Right. So on the night that they have 2 for 1, the place is mobbed, and they have a private party at the house by the, so just
Right.
all kinds of things. So at the end of the day, my point is they're going to come back. They have to come back at some point. We have to make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed, and we have to we need to understand what their hours of operations are, what they are, and they need to be specific on the site plan. And again, my business, at my quarries, I have to meet certain decibels at the property line. I know we don't have a noise ordinance, but when I put those in, I was required to do things so I didn't disturb the neighbors. They should be held to the same standards as every business. Why? And no business should be able to overtake their neighbors. Shouldn't be able to do it.
I thought we
It
did
should
have a
be
noise.
fair for everybody.
So
I don't care what the business
So we're
is.
questioning if we want a compliance hearing, and we know Spooky World is right. Halloween is 2 weeks away as well. I mean, do we? Is it up to Mr. Charbonneau to decide, or is it up to us to decide?
No,
knowing that
I
core
think it's up
business
to
is
the
right?
board to decide. I think what would be prudent is, and I'm certainly happy to do it, but I think what would be prudent is to review the conditions of approval,
Okay.
For the site plan, and then I think we can make a determination as to the best course.
I agree.
Absolutely.
And if maybe even provide a list from your perspective of the things that they're not complying with that are on the site plan, so that we're clear from your perspective what that is. And if in fact it looks like that's the case, if it was in the site plan, they're not doing it, then we should have a compliance hearing. They should
So-
come in and explain why they haven't done what they agreed to do.
Again, in doing that, when you look at the conditions of what we just approved, is it for the bumper boats or was it for Spooky World? They were all wrapped into one. So putting the fence around Carnage is part of Spooky World, but when that approval got approved, was that part of the bumper boats?
So we need them to be explicit. Is
Well,
it fall? or-
You guys have to decide. I can't tell you. I know the
No, if you
fences
want
and
them to say it
I
on the
understand.
notes, to make the notes more
But
clear.
even just doing that, to say, there's no fence, there should have been a fence. Maybe there's a question about, who's supposed to be putting it up, or whatever. But at least if we, from your perspective, if we understand what you think they haven't done, and then if we could look at that to compare it to the site plan, and if we do think that there are things that they haven't done, then I think you should come back to the board, and I, for one, would be in favor of having a compliance hearing.
Do we want to make that we make it a motion during public input? It's kind of public input, but.
Either way, I think we'll
Do
get
we
it
all
done.
want to-
I'll certainly review.
I think we need to review first. Yeah.
Oh, no, I know, but do we want to agree that to what you just said? Can we do that during,
Sure.
public input? Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
I don't know if we need a motion at this
No,
point.
to do what
I-
you
I-
said, review the conditions of the approval, right? See if Mr. Charbonneau would give us a list of what he thinks has happened and what Troy has also done. And we'll talk to see what's explicit or implicit on those, does it apply to the spooky world? Does it apply to the, non-fall issues? Yeah. And we can look at the notes from that perspective as well and see if they're clear or not.
And basically the result of that is us
Then the result
determining
will be
if
determined,
they're
yeah.
compliant or not.
Right. And then if they're not, then we
Well, if
may
there's a need for
pursue.
a compliance hearing,
Right.
and then to give them a chance to come in and say why they are in compliance or are not, and then then if we think that they're not, then we refer it to the appropriate place.
So there would be a compliance hearing. Okay. Great. Okay.
Okay,
Does
thank you.
anybody want to second that?
I will.
Was that a
second
motion?
That was a motion from
Sure,
James
that's fine.
and Joshua. Okay. Better, at least it's not going to be, keep going forward. Does anybody else have any discussion or any other input from the public on non-agenda items?
Well, as far as lessons learned from that, can we add dates to conditional approvals, like certain things have to be
Absolutely.
completed by certain
Yes.
times? Okay. So we'll know for next time. Let's see.
Okay, I'll then close public input on non-agenda items.
So are we officially voting on that or?
Oh, we did, I'm sorry, you're right. No, you're right. Okay, so we have a first and a second, okay.
It's not a motion to have the compliance hearing.
No, it's just to
Right,
do the preliminary research on it.
Okay.
All right.
Then second.
We have a second. We have a first and a second. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, abstained? Okay, I think it's 600. Okay, public input's closed. Okay. Agenda item 1. An application by the Roman Catholic Bishop of Manchester, St. Francis of Assisi Parish, 9 Street, Francis Way, map 22, lot 100, and Emily and David Baker, 506 Charles Bancroft Highway, for an off-premise electric sign located at 506 Charles Bancroft Highway, map 22, lot 2. The applicant has received a variance for an electronic sign. Would you like to come up and introduce yourself and the project?
Good evening. My name is Laura Gandia. I'm here on behalf of St. Francis of Assisi Church as the Finance Council Chair, and also here under written authorization from Emily and David Baker for the sign permit. St. Francis received a variance, 2 variances, one for an off-premise sign to be located at 506 Charles Bancroft Highway, and two for an electronic message board sign, and you should have that in the package. After we receive those, we submitted our sign application that we believe meet all of the requirements of the town, and you have the sign in front, up on the screen there.
So that's the new sign and that's the old sign?
No, there's no sign now. So St. Francis,
Oh, there isn't a sign there? Why?
no, and that's why we need an off-premise sign, because St. Francis sits way in the back, so you don't even see St. Francis from Charles Bancroft Highway.
Right.
So it's going to be located, if you can, I don't know if you can orientate yourself for where that sign is on Charles Bancroft Highway. Right across the street is Albuquerque.
Yep.
Oh, just a little bit further south. So we would like to put the sign there at that corner in that street. Right behind the sign is St. Francis Way, which leads you directly to St. Francis Church. So there's no sign there at all.
Really, for some reason.
Yeah, was there
I
a
thought I
sign?
remember
in the
there was a
past?
sign.
It's a little
That's
blue,
weird.
like
Is that
highway
like
sign,
that
right?
exact
Yeah, there's a
sign
blue
is-
little, like, I don't know if
Yeah.
the New Hampshire
Really?
DOT puts a
It belongs
sign
there.
up,
Yeah.
but there's that, but never an official St. Francis sign for
Okay.
the church.
Can I ask, so is there lighting in the sign?
Yes, if you look at that where it says First Saturday Adoration, that's going to be an electronic message board where we'll be able to change the message periodically, and that was approved by the zoning board.
All right, well, that's the only sign.
Will look just like that, right?
Yeah,
That would be
there's
it.
no spotlights or anything. It's just that, the lower section
Is the electronic message board.
and it's gonna look like that.
Yes, and the color will be amber.
Okay.
It's not, it wouldn't have graphics or anything. It's essentially just
No,
the
just wording,
changing
just
letters
text.
and no scrolling
No.
or anything. Okay.
But the message will be changed periodically.
Yep.
Depending on.
Are you thinking of having it flash through a
No.
few messages, or is it?
The electronic message board?
Yeah.
To change the messages periodically.
But you could do that without having it lit, right? I mean, you wouldn't have to have a light in the sign.
But if you have an electronic message board, those are always lit. Some,
Right, but I mean, there were other ways you could change. I mean, you could do it the old-fashioned way, I guess, right?
you could.
So I mean, the question is, it's a lit sign on Charles Bancroft Highway,
Correct.
right? I don't know how many there are on that, but I'm just wondering, if you see it because you want to be able to make the electronic changes to the message board, which I suppose you can do remotely.
You could, but we presented our argument as to why we should be granted a variance for that, and the zoning board gave us that relief.
But I'm just curious as what the argument.
Right. Well, the argument was if you look at other signs that have the lettering, it's subject to vandalism and it doesn't look as neat and as professional as we would like it to be. And the fact that we'll be changing, the message periodically depending on events, we wanted to have the ability to be able to do that safely, remotely, and to have it look nice.
Even the town hall here, have to go out and manually change.
Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking of,
In the
actually.
winter days,
Right.
And Charles Bancroft Highway is a little bit more busy than Albuquerque, so we want to keep our
Right.
parishioners and the staff at St. Francis safe as well.
So it's not going to blind any traffic. It doesn't look like it's going to cause a problem. You have the 10-foot setback minimum, I believe. according
Yes,
to
we
the
do.
drawing here. It looks like all the height and everything.
One more question, can I ask? Is
Yeah.
it lit 24 hours a day? Well, I mean, I'm sorry, not during the day, obviously, but is it lit all night, the sign?
I don't know if the church would have it lit all night. I mean, the zoning board
Okay.
said we could have it lit and change messages periodically.
Right, I didn't know if it was, I don't know, I don't know where that is in relation to neighbors and if it's going to be lit up all evening.
It's not my understanding. That's not the intent to have it lit all evening.
When you say light, do you mean the backlighting of the letters, or is
I
there?
believe
a
he's
spotlight on
referring. No, this. I believe he's referring to the electronic message board.
it? Okay. To make sure.
I heard this meeting was long. And you've got a unanimous vote on both. Why was it so long?
Well, there were other cases. I think that was a
Oh, I heard
busy.
that when you went up, it was just forever.
You're saying I'm long-winded?
Well, they all were unanimous, so.
So I just have a question. Is it just the bottom portion of the sign that's the electronic?
Correct. So where it says St. Francis of Assisi Parish and School, that's just going to be a beautiful sign. But where it says First Saturday Adoration, that will be the electronic reader board or message board.
Thank you.
So, and I was looking at the zoning board's variance, and so it says amber light only. Messages will only be changed periodically. It will not have continuous scrolling and will not be multicolored lights.
Correct.
And that's the part of the conditions of the variant, so that in 3 years from now, you couldn't change the lighting.
Correct.
It'd be amber light. That's what
Correct.
you're committing to.
Right. Exactly. And just from the sign people point of view, they're saying that that's the best color to have for the sign that we're looking for. So we went with the advice of them.
So you're really here just for us to approve the site, the sign permit, right?
My understanding.
Does anybody else have any questions? Jake, is there anything,
It seems pretty straightforward. They did receive the variance. It looks fairly well done. I think it meets requirements.
does anyone have any more discussion? Any questions?
I think if there's a way to dim the sign, say after a certain time, reasonable where people aren't going to be really driving past it anymore, I think they should take that into consideration. And most of the time when we're looking at lighting from the buildings, we're asking for motion sensors or, dim lights to, don't really need the sign lit up at 2 a.m. Really,
Right.
and so I think that should be, if it's possible to do it with this type of sign, I think they should do that. Because I don't know that
Is this a manual control for this sign? However, I mean,
I think
somebody has to trigger that.
trigger it.
So you'd have to have a bright light one and then
If we have that option to do a bright light.
or a different font, just, not bold face. But again, is it a manual trigger at night versus, during the day? I don't know.
I'm not aware if that's even an option for us to
There's
have. And if it is an option, what the
Okay.
cost would be for that.
Oh, if it's
Oh, so
extra
maybe you can
cost
set it
or
on a timer and it
something,
could
set a
do this
timer and just shut
message.
off.
Well, we're not intending to have.
No, not change the message, but the font could be that color bold, looking big. And then at night it could be the same message, but maybe a smaller, not smaller font, but not as bold. It would reduce the light like you're talking about.
And it's my understanding, like if you look at our school election sign, like the
School election.
one that we
sign.
have, the amber sign that we have out in front of the fire station, that says special election for the school.
I don't think I've seen it. I haven't been down that way.
That's the look that it's going to have. That's the amber color lighting. So
Oh, I
when you
know
leave
amber.
here out in front of the
Yeah,
fire
yeah.
station, there's
Yep.
that big, huge.
Is it the temporary?
Right, the
temporary
temporary
sign?
one, right.
Okay.
And that's, so it's not a blinding color at all, but
Mhm.
that's the effect, obviously at a much smaller scale, because that's only, a couple of feet compared to
Yep.
what you're seeing. And that I don't think has any effect on traffic now when I was coming in.
Okay.
But you're saying if it
Yes,
is
it
an
is.
option.
Yeah, just because anything that we can do to,
Sometimes
reduce
you
unnecessary
might be able to
light
say from this time
pollution.
it might be a computer program. From this time to this time, do it that way. And from certain hours, same message, just not bold font, but maybe just normal font. That's just to make it less bright, if you can do that.
Okay.
Anything else? Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the sign permit for the Roman Catholic Church, I guess Francis of Assisi Parish?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, or any other discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Saying opposed, abstained. 600. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
When does it expect to go in?
We're
When did you
hoping
expect to put it in? Tomorrow. No.
Tomorrow.
The ink's not even dry yet.
Just need to turn the switch on.
We're hoping to get it in before, I guess, the ground
Before
freezes.
the frost.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. We'll now go to the second agenda item. A subdivision plan by the estate of Fred D. and Janet McQuestion, tax map 15, lot 14, comma, 124 Hillcrest Road to subdivide one lot into 16 lots in the residential district. If you'd like. Okay, we're going to reconvene this. It was a public hearing. We had left it open to the public last time we left on September 9th. We're going to have the applicant come up, just do a quick introduction and then any changes that you have for us today. And then we'll open it up for public comment after that. Okay?
Thank you.
Bigger one.
Thank you.
All right, all set.
We'll try. Yep. Very good.
Good evening, Tucker McCarthy. I'm an engineer with Keach Nordstrom Associates. With me this evening is John Noseworthy. He is the executor of the estate for the property that we are here this evening to discuss with you. So just to kind of refresh everybody, this project is 124 Hillcrest Road, map 15, lot 14. We are now proposing a 16-lot conservation open space development. One of the lots is getting very sophisticated here. Will be the existing house here that will remain. One of the lots will have access off of Charles Bancroft Highway, and the remaining 14 will be accessed off of the proposed roadway. So we have a number of state permits that are included as part of this project, one of which is a wetland crossing here, of which we obtained Conservation Commission approval as well as variances and special exceptions from the ZBA. Since the last time we were in front of the board, we have made some revisions to the plans which were submitted to the town. This included updating from a conventional subdivision to an open space subdivision. We also responded to the comments provided to us by LC Engineering. Most of the changes we made were minor, and we did actually receive today some follow-up comments from LC Engineering. We've actually responded and made revisions to those today already. I haven't resubmitted them, but most of those were also mostly just cleanup items at this point. At the last hearing, the board did request that we provide them with copies of the ZBA decision, which I believe you folks have. I also have a copy of it here in case you don't. The other thing that the board had asked for was a sketch showing the proposed house off of Route 3A Charles Bancroft Highway, which is what I just handed out, which we can discuss a little bit more in depth. So at this point, we are just waiting on state permits. We should hear back from alteration of terrain any day. We also would be making some revisions in response to the final peer review comments that we received today. So what we'd be looking for this evening is hopefully the board would feel comfortable to grant the project conditional approval. If you notice on sheet 2 of 26, I added a note where it says notes continued, kind of in the lower right-hand corner, note number 20. That is in response to the items that are not that have very slightly from the requirements of the open space conservation conservation open space development that we discussed at the last hearing, which happy to get into a little bit more this evening. So we would hope that the board would be open to conditional approval with those items noted, pending final review from LC Engineering, as well as us receiving our state permits. So just to kind of refresh you, actually I can just show you here. So the three different items that we're asking for are, there's 2 lots that aren't accessed off of the proposed driveway. We also have this lot here, which, as we discussed, we were corrected, actually has a 250-foot setback off of Route 3A. And then these 3 lots would also have a 150-foot setback off of the existing right-of-way. So what we would be requesting is this to be reduced to 50 feet, which we meet, and then this to be reduced to 150 feet. And if the board would like, at this point, I can kind of get into the sketch that I provided, if that makes sense. So what we looked at is the requirement of 250 feet. And then also one of the things that we wanted to consider was if we reduce that, kind of where that house would sit. So you can see the red line is at 250 feet, pushes that house considerably back from the road. With the granting of this easement to the town, it really limits the space that you could build a house, also creates quite a long driveway. So if you look at the yellow line, that would be 150 feet, which we would be requesting that the board allow us to do. As you can see, pushes that house quite a ways back from the road. Actually, that adjacent barn there, we're behind that barn, well behind the existing houses in this area, not only on either side of us, but across the street. So we felt that, given where the 250 feet pushes us back, that in other places in town other than Route 3A, 150 feet is required, and we thought that that might be appropriate for this application. That's pretty much all I have. Really not much has changed since the last time we were in front of the board. Hopefully the board is happy with the additional information that we provided that was requested, and happy to answer any questions or discussion at this point.
So I guess my question is on the 250 feet, but that's what's in the regulations, right? Does anybody know where that came from and why that's 250 on 3A? I mean, that was I'm assuming a result of a deliberative process where people thought that through and said, we want a 250-foot setback on 3A. Is that right?
I wasn't here at the time the ordinance was drafted. I could speculate, and that the reason why a greater setback is required from 3A, the 250 versus the 150 feet in all other circumstances, I would imagine is an effort to codify, longstanding goals of the town to protect the character of 3A.
Right. So that makes sense to me, right? There was a thoughtful, deliberative process to set that at 250. You're asking us now to ignore that and to do a setback that's 150. And I'm not quite sure why, except that you're asking for it.
Well, as what Jay just said, that was put in place to protect the character. However, if you look in this specific area, the character is actually houses right up against the road. So that's why we felt that reducing it a little bit to 150 feet actually more met the character of this specific area.
But those houses, I don't know, but were those houses constructed before the ordinance was passed?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point, the town said, no, we understand that there are houses, there are historical structures there, but from this point on, we want a 250-foot setback. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think you'd have to give me personally a reason why I should ignore what was a deliberative process, a decision by the town to do that, other than we just want to do it.
And there's another piece to this that it's not just the 250 feet, it's whether there should be a house on that piece at all. Because they're also asking for the variance so that the access to the house isn't on that cul-de-sac. So it's a two-part variance. It's whether there should be a house there at all and should it be within 250 feet. So that's another piece to keep in mind.
Do we want to handle the two requests separately? It's the two lots up here that
Yep.
need a variance, right? And then 3A also needs it.
So the one thing that I would like to point out is that 250 feet is for a conservation open space development. Now, we received variance for that for reduced frontage. So legally,
have
I
a
could go
question
and
on that, actually.
legally, I could go and build a house 50 feet from the road
Well,
right
they
now.
wrote everything saying, this is for 310, right? A request variance from section 300, article 310, allowing construction of a single-family home with 133 foot of frontage, where it's 150 feet required. But if you look at 310 note 7, and I have it here, let me get it. Note 7 says, all lots with frontage on Route 102 and lots with frontage on Route 3A created on or after 3/14/1989 shall have a 200-foot frontage. And your variance only says 150 feet multiple times. So if it's 133 feet and it was 150-foot waiver you were trying to get it for, that's 88.6% is what you had. But according to this note, if it's 200 feet and you have 133 feet, you're only fulfilling 66%.
That may be so. It didn't come up in the
It's right here
ZBA
if you
hearing.
want
We
to, I have it.
have a variance for a
Yeah,
reduced
but you have it for
frontage to 100.
150 feet. But the
But the variance
variance,
is to allow construction of a single-family home with
but
132
again, the variance, you
feet.
didn't finish reading the variance. There's 7 notes with that, not the variance, but that section, whatever, 300 or 310, 310. So that's just a question I have, but I think it says that you have, if it's after 1989, it has to be 200 feet of frontage. That's the first issue that we're going to talk about,
So that lot was created well before 1989.
but not the house, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to clarify though that regardless of the variance, what the variance did was allow a lot to be created with less than required frontage. That doesn't improve the lot. The lot still didn't exist. So in order for that lot to exist, it still needs planning board approval. That still invokes the open space ordinance because the property is over 20 acres. So the board, it's not correct that the applicant could go and build, that lot today. It still would require planning board approval to subdivide the lot.
Okay, now what about this 200 feet? Because again, the variance that they said is 150 feet. It's listed multiple times here. They're saying 150 feet, 150 feet.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, regardless of the variance, you
Yep.
still need planning board approval in order to subdivide the lot.
Oh, I agree, yes.
In
I
order to
agree.
get planning board approval, the planning board either had to grant a conditional use to allow a conventional subdivision,
Mhm.
which was initially what was applied for, or approve an open space ordinance and grant the variations from the requirements of the open space ordinance that have been requested.
But I'm just,
It's,
yeah, I
it's
agree.
not correct that the applicant could simply go and do
Right.
a conventional lot
Right.
with the variance.
I only brought that up
So-
because she was asking if you could even build on
So-
it. So
so
that's
two-
one of the
two
questions
things
I had.
I don't mean to, Jay is correct. What I meant so first of all, this lot was created in, I think, the 30s or the 40s. So we're well before 1989. So that note 7 does not apply. What I was more getting to from Jay's point is that if I didn't subdivide this and I left this as one piece connected to the rest, I could go build a house 50 feet from the road.
But you still have to subdivide the property because there's already a house on the lot.
Without subdividing anything. If I just left it one property, I could build a house.
Not without subdivision because there's already a house on the lot.
True.
And that would invoke the open space ordinance. So
You're right. Apologize.
So I want to understand about this date. You're saying with it, if we subdivide it today or whenever we just subdivide it, what is the age of that? Is that before 1989 or is that today?
I'm saying it's irrelevant because the property is over 20 acres, the open space ordinance
That's
is
if they stay
invoked.
with open space concept, right? If they stay, that's why they're here tonight.
Either way, either you have to have the planning board agree to grant a conditional use permit so that they don't have to do the open space, which is again at the discretion of the board,
Right.
or they have to meet the requirements of the open space ordinance. So now they have proposed an open space ordinance.
Right.
So, but in order to build the development that they seek, they need the board to authorize variations from that ordinance. So it's one or the other.
And with the open space development, we don't need the variance at all because it reduces the frontage to 90 feet.
Right, 90 feet.
Right.
I thought he needed another variance for the front though, curb cuts or something. Wasn't there something that was needed there?
Well, it's variance is zoning board. So the
Well,
term.
I'm not, yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
I guess
I thought there were two
It's a-
waivers you were here for us for.
no
Up there.
waivers, it's variations
Okay,
from which is
variations.
allowed in the
Right.
open space. It allows the planning board to,
Okay.
it's not even a vote necessarily as a waiver. It's just to approve it, not specifically complying to those. And it's not everything in the open space. It's just specifically that section, which is mostly the dimensional stuff.
Do we want to handle them separately or do we have to?
I would
approve them
suggest it just because there's differences between the lots on Hillcrest
Mhm.
and the lot proposed on 3A.
separately? Are you okay if we handle?
Yeah, sure.
The other thing.
Oh, yeah.
Keep in
You were
mind,
over there just a second.
keep in mind that there's a house that's just getting built right now that has that 150 feet or less setback from the road. On 3A, right? 2 lots down. But there's one being built and there's gonna be another one next to it. So there's 2 lots where that house is being built right now. There's 2 lots there, one being built now and they're gonna build the other house here, I believe, next summer. So those 2 houses have less than that.
Hey, we haven't seen
I
that
would
one
say
yet.
those lots were created.
We haven't seen that one.
Three.
Okay.
How does that happen? I mean,
It was a subdivision. It was approved subdivision.
That was after 89, because my brother-in-law and my sister owned those lots and that land and.
oh, the house that are being built now, you said there's a house that's being built now that's less than 250 feet.
Well, it's most likely because it wasn't an open space subdivision.
It wasn't open, right.
But it was built, I know that was subdivided after 89.
That only puts the 200 feet of frontage into requirement, the 89 or not the setback.
The setback was 2010 when that was put in. The open
But
space.
regardless, the
development was
250 feet from an existing right of way on 3A only comes into effect when you're doing an open space subdivision. So if that was a frontage chop is what we call it, basically you have a long lot and you chop it up and it's not an open space subdivision, the setback's 50 feet. Well, that may not be correct. I don't know what.
That was a subdivision though that went all the way up to Albuquerque also. That was a piece of property that went from 3A all the way to Albuquerque. So it's Westview Drive. That's all one piece of property all the way up.
And I also think if you look at the houses on either side of us, the intent of the 250 feet was not to have houses up against 3A, but whether this house is 150 or 250, you're likely not really going to see it with those houses right up against the road on either side. So the argument that we have for reducing that in this specific condition is the houses on either side in the proximity are right up against the road. It doesn't necessarily change the character of this neighborhood to be at 250 feet versus 150 feet.
Do you want me to have public input or do you want me to start? We should.
Yeah, I mean, unless the applicants have more that they want to explain, I think it'd be appropriate to open it to public input.
Does anybody here have questions?
So I'm trying to understand the difference between the 250 in an open space and 150 in a non-open space.
50. It's 150 from any road that's not 3A. So it's 150 foot setback from any existing right of way, and then it's 250 feet from 3A, which is only applies if it's an open space conservation subdivision. But
So
if it
what's the
was a
reason for-
regular,
so
it would
can you
just be
help me
50
understand
feet.
The reason for that, for an open space, subdivision, they have a 250-foot setback. What, do you know? Or does anyone know what the reason for that is?
Well, I think that if you look at the standard that the board, it's anticipated the board would apply, it would be on page 27 of your ordinance under F.
Yep.
So the board may authorize the variations from the above standards, except for what's controlled by the state, for the purpose of providing flexibility in the design of the subdivision to meet the objectives of this ordinance section. The objectives are then listed on page 21. So, this is where you see preserve natural beauty and rural character, preserve farmland, forests, etc. So these are the purposes for which the open space ordinance was created. Those are the objectives. And the question would be whether or not the board believes that granting any of the variations that are requested, you feel, provides flexibility in the design of the subdivision for the purpose of meeting the objectives of the ordinance. So that's really the question.
But the objectives of the ordinance were to keep it rural, is what you're saying, and agricultural.
Well, the objectives are listed.
That's every map.
That's among them. So they're listed A through F. So there are various ones, but I think that's really the question.
So if anything, pushing the house farther back creates more impervious, more tree clearing, rather than leaving a little bit of it natural in the back of the lot.
Well, it's really having the house at all is what's going to not preserve the character. And that's what I think we're having trouble with coming to terms with is I don't see how having that house there, allowing that variance for that house meets this requirement of that it is providing flexibility to meet the objectives. Because it just goes against the objectives. It goes against this master plan. I was trying to, come up with a way that we could kind of compromise with it so that we could keep that right of way, not building into the right of way and everything. But that's at least what I'm not seeing is why having the house there at all would be, we should add that variation.
If we put the cul-de-sac in off of 3A.
Well, it proves the yield, yeah. But
May I also read another note? I just want to make sure, I'm looking at your drawing, I don't have the actual setbacks here, but another note on that, that first variance you had, I don't know if it's 300 or 310. I read your note 7, but note 8, I just want to make sure you're compliant with it, is all buildings or structures shall be set back from side or rear lot lines a distance equal to or exceeding the height of the said structure. So I don't know if this is a 2-story house or what you planned.
So-
If it went here where you're saying,
the open space requires a 50-foot setback from existing lots of record, which is greater than it typically would
are you
be.
talking about the rear line here?
No, I'm talking about on either side of the house.
I'm looking at it right here, yep. I just want to make sure that you're compliant with this is all I'm asking.
So typically the side setbacks are, I think, 20 feet, but because we have an existing lot of record here, it's a 50-foot buffer. So we are within the 50-foot buffer on either side.
Okay, you do meet it because your house isn't going to be greater than 50 feet. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
you met it, that's all. Because I couldn't tell by this darker.
It
Drawing here.
definitely won't be 50 feet.
Okay, and then the last note said, a minimum lot size and dimension are subject to planning board approval based on sewage disposal requirements, soil types, you can see all of that. Existing conditions, but shall in no case be less than 1 continuous dry acre. Is that a continuous dry acre?
So the open space allows a reduction in the lot area to
For dry, I'm just reading the note of what it's saying here. That same, yeah. So I just want to make sure, I don't even know if that is a complete acre, actually.
it doesn't need to be for an open space subdivision.
Is that true?
Yeah.
It does not have to be an acre,
It can be less for an open space.
but does it have to be dry? It says a dry
So
acre.
for minimum
I just want to make sure you're compliant, that's all.
Yeah, so there are requirements when we did, so that the yield plan proves that we can do that, because you
Yield
can't
plan.
include wetlands, you can't include easements in the buildable area. So the yield plan proves that we can do that conventionally. So
If I may, so in an open space subdivision, the minimum lot size is half an acre, 21,780 square feet of contiguous dry land.
Do you meet that? I just want to make sure you met that.
what page are you on?
21,000, yes.
26.
Yes, we do.
It's dry. That's what I'm doing.
21,000 is less
Okay.
than, just under half.
Just under half an acre.
So the other thing I'd like to point out is that originally we had applied for a conditional use permit to not do an open space subdivision. And the feedback we got is that we didn't feel that the board liked that. So this lot needing to be off of the road only applies when you change over to an open space subdivision. So, we're doing our best to work with the board. We've added this easement here for the rail trail, which we didn't have to do. We've deed restricted this entire wetland in the middle of the property. And it is the applicant's desire they would like to build a house off of Route 3A. There's other houses being built now, as Rick mentioned, much closer to the road. And we just feel with what we've proposed and what we'd like to do is reasonable.
The site plan reg, can someone quickly look up 120.1.5E? It has to do with driveways where they're located. The spacing has to be 300 feet on Route 3A. So it's site plan regs. I just want to make sure it's
It'd be
compliant.
the subdivision regs that would
I don't
apply
know, I
here.
wrote down site plan regs for driveways, 120.1. I have my book under here. So 120.1, then there's a 5E or something. Maybe I shouldn't have been site plan, maybe it's subdivision. I don't know why I wrote that down. Has to do with driveways.
Driveway access spacing.
Yeah, 5E, what does it say there?
Driveway access spacing shall be measured from the edge of the proposed driveway pavement to the nearest edge of the roadway of the adjacent or opposite driveway or street. Where
Just wanna
possible,
make
shared
sure we
driveways
meet
are
that.
encouraged.
Is it were you looking at subdivision regs or?
This is the site plan.
Okay, so site plan regs are on page 23.
Yep.
Again, I just want to make sure. It's hard to tell feet from these drawings. Huh?
No, I thought.
I don't believe I have the dimensional requirements of the subdivision regulation specifically. So,
Is it subdivision?
It's
I
the
thought it
site
was-
plan
Site
regulations.
plan.
so
Let me
this
see
is
if I
this
got it.
is a
Site
subdivision
that
plan.
it would subdivision that would apply in this circumstance.
Say that again?
It's subdivision that would apply here rather than site plan, because the site plan is non-residential site plan, so
Okay,
that wouldn't apply.
okay, just was checking on driveways.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if
I don't want that.
if you had 90 feet of frontage allowed, you'd never have driveways.
I thought it was saying
300 feet
between your
apart.
driveway and the driveway next to you, it had to be 300 feet. I thought that's where it was going.
There is a minimum required distances between curb cuts and the site plan regulations. There are.
Okay, well, I don't know if I looked that one up.
Well, but this isn't.
No,
This is in the
this
site
is-
plan.
Okay, I just thought I read that somewhere and I wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, so we don't have to meet that one. Good. What does-
So
yeah.
can you remind me of what happened so you initially were going at a conventional subdivision. Then I'm not even sure I was here, the planning board, some discussions here made you go, I see proposing an open space development does not provide any advantage to the project. This is from
Yeah,
The
so
conditional use
that was a
permit.
conditional use permit, application, which we withdrew.
Okay. So, but you're still under an open space.
So the regs, I believe, is it 20 acres?
20 years.
So if the parent lot is over 20 acres, you are required to do an open space subdivision. So in order to do conventional, you would need a conditional use permit, which is how we had approached it initially. We got some feedback after initial review before the first hearing. We had a conceptual hearing, and then we submitted officially. We received some feedback from the board's planner that wasn't necessarily in meeting the intent of the regulations. So we decided to switch that, and it doesn't actually change the layout whatsoever of the subdivision. Simply that we're providing an open space subdivision rather than a conventional subdivision.
Okay. And so what's the difference in frontage there? So it's like, sometimes it's like drinking out of a fire hose here.
So it's 150 versus 90 feet of frontage. So these lots, I don't actually think you could reduce them to 90 because they wouldn't have enough land because they're skinny, because it's a long, skinny lot.
Okay. And it's 150 on that lot that's on 3A.
It's 132.8. We got a variance to reduce from 150 to 132.8.
Okay.
But part of the, I have to read this again.
So he's telling me 150. I keep hearing 250. So
That's the setback.
That's the setback.
Yeah,
Okay.
setback. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot.
So one of the things that we had trouble with after we switched to an open space subdivision is that an open space subdivision doesn't allow you to build lots with a yield that requires a waiver or variance. But we were able to prove that you could technically build a cul-de-sac road here and build off of that. So that provided us the yield to then do the open space subdivision of 16 lots. There's a lot of moving parts here. Yes, I know. You're not the only ones that have been confused.
Right.
We have been as well.
And you're asking for a variance on a variation
Yeah.
on the setback.
Yeah. So if you look at the open space subdivision, section 575.6, which is dimensional requirements of the open space subdivision, F says, which Jay just read, it, the planning board may authorize variations from the above standards. So it's not necessarily a waiver. It's not anything. It's just that the board would make a vote to approve the plan as shown, with basically some of the setbacks shown that aren't required in this section, as well as those two lots that aren't off of the developed road.
Right, so, but that section says that we may authorize a variation for the purpose of providing flexibility in the design of the subdivision to meet the objectives of this ordinance section. Right?
Mhm.
So how does that variation meet the objectives of this ordinance section?
Well, I mean, we have a huge wetland in the middle of our site, you know, if we had enough room to build that cul-de-sac farther and have the lot sizes that we want, we may not be doing this. But in order to get the lot sizes to be able to build the type of house that they want to build on that subdivision, rather than squeezing those lots down, they'd like to build here. So if we didn't have that wetland, we could make the cul-de-sac longer and put all the houses there. But because of this wetland that we're preserving and giving the town an easement,
Well, you could build
Pushes
fewer
it.
houses, right?
what's that?
You could build fewer houses,
Sure. Sure.
and that would address the issue.
Sure.
And then, but, so I'm actually more concerned about the house, the proposal on 3A. How does that variation provide the flexibility in the design of the subdivision to meet the objectives of this ordinance section? I mean, again, I'm back to where I was. It sounds like there's a 250-foot setback. I still haven't heard a good reason why we should vary from that.
Why is 150 meeting the objectives better than 250?
Well, I mean, I could have come and asked you to reduce it to 50 or 100, you know.
You did initially. That's when you came. That's what you came in last time. That's
Sure.
what you asked for.
Yep.
And then we told you that it was 250, right? So that was your original plan was 50.
Yeah, and then we got feedback from the board that the board didn't feel that was appropriate, so now we pushed it back to 150 feet.
Right. But that still doesn't get me to a rationale to authorize a variation. That's what you're asking us to do tonight.
Yep. I mean, again, you know, we got a variance for reduced frontage, seeing that it met with the character of the neighborhood. You know, if you're at 150 feet back from the road versus 250 feet, pushes you right up against this easement, closer to the wetland. You're building a longer road, you know, more impact. You know, I just don't see what it gains you to push the house back 100 feet farther from the road.
Because that's the requirement. I mean, again, I think.
But that
what you were
specific
saying, that's what
section-
this says that the town wants to do, right?
But why?
It has
I
been
don't know what the
stated
reasons
many
were.
times in our master plan, all the chapters, probably at least
Okay,
35,
but
40
I could see that if you had no houses for a long stretch and all of a sudden you're putting a house, but 250 feet is a long ways. And these houses here are practically on the lot line on either side of the street. So it almost is going to look
Subdivision and
funny.
Subplan again, but there was something where you were supposed to build the houses in the same area, the same setback.
Well, so there's two issues. One is whether or not to grant a variation from the setback, and that's both on 3A and Hillcrest. The other issue, though, is that all the lots in an open space subdivision need to take access off of the proposed interior road. So in order to build a lot on 3A, they're seeking both a variation from the setback as well as a variation from the regulations to allow the driveway off of 3A versus the interior road. So there's two issues there. There's also a similar request on Hillcrest with regard to the existing house.
So these are the four here that we can go over one at a time.
But
Go ahead.
but we
Sorry.
still could build
Right.
a cul-de-sac off of 3A.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that if we.
If
switch
a
gears.
subdivision, was proposed to the board and the board approved it and it met the regs, yes.
But you could build a cul-de-sac off of 3A.
We have
Sounds
all
like
we
you
can
were
do to
doing
get
a
around this one. Let's stick to these rules first, but yeah, there's a lot here.
But you want to know what
See,
the
yeah,
difference is. We could come back, we could say, okay, table this. We're going to come back with it showing a cul-de-sac coming off of 3A.
But that's with a conventional.
No, open lot.
No,
it would still be open.
The open space.
Okay, well, I don't
You
want to
have
do
to have.
hypotheticals,
The
but
open space doesn't say you have to have one road.
so
Right.
question. We want to have public input as well when we're done and go over these four, but should we split it up and we vote a certain way on, say, up on the other two lots and say another way on 3A? Can we do that if they are not happy with the results? I'm just saying hypothetically. I don't know how people are going to vote.
Of course.
So should we do them separately is my point. And
If you think it would be, prudent, if there may be differences of opinion, versus, granting a variation in one area, versus the other, then I think it would absolutely
so
make
if the first
sense
part,
to
say the
break
two
it up.
lots up there were granted the variation. And I'm just saying hypothetically, say 3A wasn't, does that, if they wanted to come back later, does this hurt anything that we're doing by approving one and not another, if that's how the scenario worked out?
No.
Okay, I
So
didn't know if they wanted to just say,
I do want to bring up
Yeah.
a good point that Rick just brought up that I hadn't thought about, is that this does say that access and frontage to individual lots shall be taken from the proposed road network. If we were to propose a road here, I don't see why that wouldn't be considered part of the road network, and then you could build a house there. So this is certainly less impactful than that.
And that would be, certainly up to you if you wanted to propose that.
Right, and we could probably build two because then we'd be down to 90 feet of frontage.
Possibly.
Is the public input still open?
we have to open it now, it's not. I don't think it was. I think I closed public input,
I don't
didn't I?
think it did.
Yeah, we
I
didn't,
did not?
we haven't taken public input yet.
No, we haven't for this.
For
Are you
this,
talking-
right.
Yeah.
I'd like to have some public.
Okay, is that okay?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to open this up to receive public input on this project. Is there any?
Yes.
Yes?
Joan McKibben, Conservation Commission. I would just like to say on this lot on 3A, that would be much less impact with a 150-foot setback, with less impervious area, and as I said, not cutting into the tree line. I think it'd be foolish to go back 250, put the house up against the wetland, which isn't doing anything for anybody, and less impact from the Conservation Commission standpoint. That's all I have. And certainly less impact than a road would have.
Okay, anybody else from the public? Come on up and introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Mary Colby, and I own the abutting property at 323 Charles Bancroft Highway. My property is a historically significant house from the 1760s and one of the oldest houses in town. I have gone on the record with my opposition to the part of this plan that includes a house being built north of my property on Charles Bancroft Highway. And yes, my house is close to the road, which I dealt with in the previous meetings. That's the way houses were built back in the 1700s. Wouldn't be my choice to have it that close to the road, but I don't really think that that should have bearing on where this proposed house would be. The proposed plan calls for several houses being built off of Hillcrest Road that will not affect the rural nature of Charles Bancroft Highway and the agricultural nature of our town. These are not in question at this time and will give the property owners a chance to profit from their land. As a member of the Litchfield Historical Society, I sat in on several meetings in years past when the master plan for the town was being developed. I have reviewed the plan, and there are many references to keeping open space in the town as an important goal. Maintaining the rural and agricultural nature of the town is important to the citizens and has been mentioned as one of the reasons people moved to Litchfield. The zoning laws and planning board of the town were instituted because the citizens realized that they did not want development on every square acre in town. Building on lots that do not meet the zoning laws and planning board's vision will change the nature of the town and eliminate open space. As the master plan indicates, farmhouses, farm buildings, and open spaces present a strong image to residents and visitors. Other towns in the area have lost their traditional appearance due to overdevelopment. It is not too late for us to preserve the nature of our town. The zoning ordinances are laws of the town and they should be adhered to. They were passed for a reason, to protect our community, and the laws should be obeyed. The master plan was developed to plan for future growth of the town. If an exception is granted every time someone comes forward and asks, pretty soon this town will have no open spaces, and what is the point of the master plan? As it is stated in the plan, preservation opportunities lost today may never be available again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I hope that my concerns will be considered. Thank you.
Thank you.
I go back to the same thing about open space. We need to preserve it. I agree that we need to preserve it, but how is it going to be taken care of? I think it's up to the landowners to take care of the property. Again, I don't know if you've had a chance to drive past the library and look across the street. That used to be farmland. Then the state bought it, and look what it is now. And if this isn't developed, then hopefully if it is developed and someone builds a house on it, hopefully they take care of it. Otherwise, it's going to look like that. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think it's very appealing looking across from the library. It's just a bunch of trees that grew up like a little jungle. So we can leave this as open space and we can have something that looks like that. Or we can put a house out there, and most people along 3A take pretty good care of their houses. I mean, I guess that's a choice. It's have something, I don't mean to be blunt, but ugly, or have something with a house that someone's gonna take care of. And I think those are the choices. I mean, it's no different on the other side of the southern side of Marion's house. The town owns a lot right there where the Grange was. The only reason it looks the way that it looks is because the guy that lives in the back mows it. The guy the drywall, he takes care of that. If he didn't mow it, it would just grow up like a jungle because the town owns it. They wouldn't take care of it. So, it's kind of, you really need to think about who's going to take care of it if it's going to be open space, and if everybody's okay with it looking like a jungle or whatever, then I guess that's okay. As I said to you before, around my house, before I bought all the fields that I bought behind my house, they were turning the same way. And I spend a lot maintaining my fields and making them look the way they look. And I think everybody along the farmers and whatever, when those farms are gone, they're going to turn into wild, if it does happen. So it's the same thing here. I mean, at the end of the day, it's as long as they're maintained, they look good. When they're not, they don't. And if this is left as an open space, it's going to be part of the subdivision and it's not going to get taken care of. So that's really what you got to decide.
Yeah, and I respect your opinion on that, but I would say that part of the objectives of the town is not just the rural character, it's the forests and it's the open land. So it might not look pretty because it's not manicured, but eventually that grows up and it's habitats for all of these populations of animals that we're trying to preserve. And then we're going to build a house on it and put some grass down and add some more chemicals to make it greener and use the water to water it. And
It's farm that gets chemicals.
Right. But if it's forest, it doesn't.
Yeah.
If it's overgrown, and it might not look pretty for a while, but eventually it turns into forest again.
Because of the nature of the land, I mean, I guess if you think across from the library and all the way down through there looks good, then that's okay. I mean, we don't all like vanilla ice cream,
Right. right.
It's a difference, and it's an opinion of what the board wants and what you think.
But here's the difference. For that land across from the library, that can be reclaimed. You can go in and you could do something else with it. You build a house on it, that's gone.
Who's going to reclaim it, though?
Well, I don't know, but it has the potential of being reclaimed. If you build a house on it, that's it. You could build a house at every open lot on 3A, or you could build businesses, or you could do something. You could do it, but once you lose that land and you dedicate it for a purpose like a home or a business, it's gone.
I agree with that. But chances of anybody reclaiming them after, that's pretty, especially if it's left as open space, because then it's left as open space forever. And we need open space, and we do have a lot of open space already, but I've made sure in all the developments that I've done, we've ended up with a lot of open space. I mean, we connected the Litchfield Town Forest to the Muskwa Swamp. I mean, there's 200 acres that I could have developed out there that we made sure that was connected. Not that it's anything to do with this, but there are a lot of open spaces in town that really nobody takes care of even now. No one's harvesting them, no one's making sure. So, we've done a lot of things already to protect a lot of open space.
And we are deed restricting about 10 acres in the middle of this property that will always be natural. Can't be anything, nothing can be built, developed, nothing out there.
I have around my quarries, I have 400 acres that will never be developed around it. The quarry's being developed, but there's buffers that'll never be built. They'll never be touched. So there's a lot of open space for people to use. I'm not saying you don't need it, but I just think along 3A, it looks better when it's maintained. That's my personal feeling.
So what happens with this lot if the variation is not granted? Does that mean that it's part of the open space in the oh my god, I'm mixing up my words. In the conservation open space development, there's the open space requirements. Is that a part of that then?
It could be, that could be.
Or how,
That
I
could
guess
be
I'm
to
not
the
sure.
discretion of the board.
If the variance isn't granted, what is that? Is that a piece of that, one of the lots off the edge of the cul-de-sac, or?
Well, as proposed now, it will be completely disconnected because there's deed restricted land in between. So presumably it would be. I mean, I think that's something that the board could consider is if you were to decide not to grant the two variations to allow that to be a house lot, whether or not you would want to see that incorporated into the deed restricted portion of the property as open space.
Like a conditional approval? A condition of approval? Okay.
But I would again like to point out that, we could come back and put a road in here, and then we're not asking for a variation for a house to be built, not on the connected roadway, because we'd have a road here. So if that's what the board likes, we think this is less impactful.
Well, that's unless we make the condition of approval that that's part of the open space.
I would think that we would have to agree to that. You can't just tell us what to do. We have to put plans forth that get approved or not, so.
No, because I appreciate everything, especially that your family, everything has done for the town. So this is tough.
Well, so I think to James' point earlier, there's a regulation in place, and I think someone in public input said we're just making exceptions just to make exceptions. I would
what I'm
vote for the
struggling with.
variation
Yep.
if I can be shown that 150 setback is better to meet the objectives than 250. Joan was the closest I've heard to saying that.
Well, I think the 150 does, but it's a matter of whether we should approve it. A house goes on that portion.
Well, yeah,
at
that's
all.
the
That's
other
what I'm having.
thing.
I'm struggling
Yeah.
with. It's approving the variation for the reasons that you had brought up. It goes against the master plan. It goes against the objectives of the open space development ordinance, and that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know if anyone else.
But
has
again, you have to
any
remember,
but-
you could have a road with a huge cul-de-sac here, and then we wouldn't be talking about this.
I mean, anything is possible, but I think what the board needs to act on is what's before it, not
Yep.
something that perhaps could come forward at some future time. Just to note, though, on page 28, under control and management of common and open space land, the ordinance does state common land, private roadways, green space, etc., that is not held in private ownership or designated as open space shall be held, maintained, and managed in a manner approved by town council and acceptable to the planning board. So the planning board does have the ability to, I should say, how any land that is that is proposed not to be part of a house lot on the plan, whether it's a road or it's open space or common land in any way, the board can impose conditions or requirements on how that land is to be maintained.
So speaking only for the proposed house lot on 3A, I would not support a variation. And I wouldn't because I think the burden is on the applicant to demonstrate that this would be justified. And I don't think you've done that. I think the master plan, everything about the 250 setback is there for a reason. And I don't see, if we're acting on what we have in front of us today, I think it's your burden. I don't think you've met your burden, and I will vote no.
So the board would prefer a cul-de-sac built here with a road. That's less impactful than 3A.
That's up to you to propose, and then would have to see if in fact you could do that. I don't know if you can or you can't. All I'm saying is, I think Jay's right. We have to act on what's in front of us, and what's in front of us is not consistent with the town ordinance, and there's not a justification that you provided for a variance.
So when we were here last hearing, there was no discussion about this. It was more that the board wanted to see something showing why we were asking to be set back from the 250. If the board had said that they were more against this lot here, we may have done that, but yeah, the red line's at 250.
I think you were supposed to provide us different scenarios. I think we were promised, looking at the minutes, that we were going to see different scenarios with different places, not just the one.
We would,
Well, you can see the lines, yeah.
Well, we can see it, but I'm just, yeah. All right, so public is still open. Does anyone have any more questions for Rick, or Rick, would you like to say anything else?
We'll change that to 250. We'll meet the requirement.
But it's still not meeting the requirement because it's not off of the cul-de-sac.
Well,
I
we're asking
think
for
the
a
one-
variation. We're
that's-
not asking for a variation for the setback, I guess, at that point.
Right.
Right, you'd still need a variation to allow access from 3A.
And I apologize
That's
for
what I was
sending us
trying to
down
say
that
earlier.
rabbit hole last time, but I was trying to see if we could come up with, a compromise that still made it so that we could approve having the lot there. And
So let's
It's
do this
just
in order then.
Well,
So
first we still have the public open.
Okay.
So do you have anything else you would like to add, or any questions for the applicants here? Because if not, I'll ask if there's anyone else that would like to speak from the public. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Would anybody else from the public like to come up and speak? Okay. So I'm going to close public, what do we call it? Whatever, I'm not going to close it. Public comment. All right, does the board have any other questions or comments? And then I will address each one of these separately.
I guess regarding the building of the house and the property, you're willing to go back to 250 feet, set it back, the variation. The real question is, does the board want to allow this property to be developed at all? And maybe something that might ease people's minds is to understand what style, how the building would look. I know, when I look at something like that, I would want to factor in what type of a property you're going to be developing there. I don't know if that's something anybody else is concerned about.
Similar to what you did up
Yeah.
in Weatherstone, or?
It was, so I also developed Weatherstone. It's going to be that same type of thing as Weatherstone. It'll be the same type of housing. It'll probably be the same building. And we closed the public hearing, but just so you know, I don't have any financial gain in this. This is John and his brother have worked for me for over 30 years, and I'm just here to help them, to guide them through it.
Okay, does the board have any other questions? If not, I'll move into the single.
Okay, so you,
Yep.
because we're doing this like split out in order.
Yeah, we're
right?
going to do that next. I'll read from our,
For the,
of,
for the
the
very,
two lots up there, and then 3A separately. Yeah,
all right.
all separate variations, yes.
And so
I
just,
know, it's.
what are those variations? The variations that Kate brought up wasn't on the docket when we came into this room tonight, right? About, it was,
it's all one section.
cul-de-sac?
And it's just two different
Yeah,
paragraphs.
it's going to be
in the
two
same
separate
section.
ones that we'll.
Okay.
Yep. Well, and I have a note here as to keep us, I have it here, so if we do miss it all.
So if I may just make one last point. So we've agreed to push the house back 250 feet. So you've asked me to prove why we should allow granting of a variation to have one lot not off the developed roadway. So if we came in here and put a cul-de-sac in and built a road and had this house back 250 feet from here, we would not be asking for any variation. So the variation is a driveway is less impactful. You're going to have a short road with a cul-de-sac built off of 3A. all of this cleared and a house all the way back here and all of this cleared. And that's why we're requesting this variation.
So where were the wetlands then?
This is the wetland line here.
What's directly behind the house, the proposed house on 3A?
Here,
Yeah.
that's the easement that we agreed to give for the old railroad. So the house would be backed right up against that. You'd likely have a septic built out front.
So looking at your easement you got proposed there, and I appreciate that, but I'm looking at, Google Earth and seeing what's there, matching kind of, I mean, there's an existing house with driveway sheds right in that same area. So, I mean, how much really is that rail trail and that railroad area going to affect this new property?
So there's no access on either side. We have no control over the further, so there is no access to this easement here. It's simply that the master plan put into place that if any projects came forward that they would request, this easement would be granted. If and such other projects came forward and those could be connected. So for now, it does nothing. I can't say about future possibility of that being connected because I have no idea what, I have never done an analysis to see if they could be developed or they wanted to develop them. So, but beyond that, the deed restriction that we're proposing would, from now until the end of time, restrict anything from happening out there.
How is this house on 3A going to get water? Is there going to be a well? What about the POFA potential issue still going on? I don't know where that stands in the state. I'm asking if this lot's even usable, I guess. Because it's not connected to town water, right?
I couldn't
not
speak
town,
to
but-
yeah, I couldn't speak to contamination.
If
I don't
there
know.
was any.
So it's a well. Okay.
There are filters, I think, if they needed to, they could put on in the well, right? Some people
I have
opted
no
for that,
idea.
I believe.
That's what I said. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be a well. If it did have it, it would be treated, but arsenics in the water is much easier ways. They all can be treated.
Let's see if I have anything else. I think you answered most of my questions. I can't even find my questions. You must have answered them. Okay. Does the board have any other questions or comments or ideas or?
I guess maybe I just don't fully understand this open space requirement section. Because it says open space in the development shall be permanently protected. So where else is that open space? If it's not that full back part of the subdivision. Am I just missing that?
So this is about 10 acres, this hatched area here.
Okay.
That would be deed
And
restricted.
that would meet the requirements of the open
There
space.
are no specific requirements. It doesn't even say that you have to provide it.
Okay.
So we've
It's
done that to try to benefit the project to the town.
But when it comes to land that isn't proposed for development, there are different things that you can do with it, and there are different ways that you can manage it. There's different ways you can protect it. And again, that's something that the board will consider as a part of its deliberation.
Am I allowed to ask somebody in the audience a question because they're still here who made a public comment? Am I allowed to do that or no?
You'd have to reopen public comment.
Is everyone okay if I open?
Yes.
I'd like to reopen public comment. Marion?
Yeah.
Colby, when you were here last time, I have notes here that I took. Did you say the survey according to your deed was not correct? Did you mention that or did I?
I did mention
not
that, and I
pick
wrote
that up right.
tonight. I've had reason lately to review my deed and the deed on 318 Charles Bancroft Highway, which originally included all of the land across the street from it and the property for the Green Hall. And
Hold on one sec. What's 318? Which one is that?
The house I currently live
That, okay, yep, all right.
Anyway, it just doesn't seem like it is exactly, it doesn't seem like it complies with what is on my deeds. I had a chance to talk to Betty McQuestion Gay, and unfortunately she has passed away, but she didn't feel that the survey was, that it jived with what her property lines were either, but I don't know.
Okay, I just want to make sure what we're looking at is, okay. So, yep,
Can I respond to that?
sure, I'm just responding. I just want to make sure that,
So with all due respect, Michael Dahlberg, who stamped these plans, has been a surveyor, a well-respected surveyor in the state of New Hampshire for over 30 years.
Yep.
We do extensive research when we do these surveys. I am absolutely 100% positive that the lines shown on the plan are correct.
all right, before I close it, is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay, I'm closing public input. All right, so we're back to step forward. Does the board have any other questions or comments before I move on to acting on some requested variations? Okay. All right, do you want me to just read them directly from here and we can discuss each one?
Yeah.
Okay. Variation 1, allow 3 houses on proposed lots 15-4, 15-4-1, and 15-14-14. I'm going to reread those. Lots 15-14, lots 15-14-1, and 15-14-14. All right. That had 2 14s. All right, to be constructed within required 150-foot setback from Hillcrest Road and to reduce the required setback to 50 feet.
And just for explanation, that is the 3 lots that are proposed on Hillcrest.
And the reason that is happening is because it flipped to open space.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense?
No, can you say that again?
The reason that they're asking for this variance is it went from a regular subdivision to open space subdivision.
In the variance or variation? Or
This is in variations.
in the variation
Get
is,
variance or in variations.
can you repeat that variation?
Yes. Allow the 3 houses on proposed lots 15-14, 15-14-1, and 15-14-14 to be constructed within the required 150-foot setback from the Hillcrest Road and to reduce the required setback to 50 feet. So from 150 to 50.
And just to note, the proposed lot 1514 is an existing house. That's this house right here. And these would be new lots. I should say, these would be new houses if approved on these lots.
So is this the existing driveway right here?
No,
Existing
this,
driveway's right here.
this would get removed. This is just kind of a gravel driveway that goes to the barn shed.
Does the board have any questions? I think he can speak even though he's not voting. Yeah, sure.
Question, actually. The one that's existing, how many feet from the road is it now? Let's see.
It's not that.
Looks like it's probably 60, 65 feet.
Yeah, in the plan that I just put up there, you can see what the 50-foot setback line would be.
So that one's not going to change then?
That has will remain, yeah.
So what exactly do you need the variance for?
So actually, you can see there's a little leftover guy that was supposed to be taken away here. Existing right-of-ways is 150-foot setback, so that's the 150. So that this entire house would be within that 150 feet.
Although the house exists, because it's proposed as part of an open space development, that invokes the 150-foot setback requirement. So that's why they're requesting relief from that. One, in deference for the existing house, but they are also requesting it for these 2 additional lots, which are similarly situated in proximity to Hillcrest.
Did you have a question? Did you want to say something? I thought you might like that.
Oh, me?
Oh,
No.
Thank you. Any other questions on this first variation?
One other question with regard to that. They are accessible from Hillcrest.
No, their driveways will be off of Jennifer Drive. So the state will not allow us to create more driveways.
Okay.
We get one more driveway and that's our proposed road.
Okay.
And that's it.
So this driveway doesn't change. These two are coming off of Jennifer.
That's correct. Yep.
There is another request for a variation regarding the driveway, but right now the issue is just the setback.
Any other discussion or questions on that?
The only reason these two are getting the setbacks is because they're coming off the existing road, and that's what the bylaws say. These don't need the same variation because it's a new road. Is that correct?
So those two newly created lots, if you had a 150-foot setback, you wouldn't be able to build a house on them.
Any other questions or
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
How far back can you go if it wasn't 50 feet? And still have those lots to build on behind it?
Not sure, maybe 75 or something. I mean, it just,
Minimal.
If it was a conventional subdivision, those lots would be lying the way they are.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing with this.
Okay, any other discussion? Question? All right, so does somebody want to make a motion regarding this first variation?
Motion.
To accept it, to say yes,
Yes.
to approve it? Do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, there's nobody to abstain, so I think it's 5-1-0. Okay, variation number 2, allow house on proposed 15-14 to obtain access and frontage from Hillcrest Road. Can you show us where that is?
That is the existing house.
Existing
and
house?
This is an existing driveway. So this request would essentially allow the existing driveway to continue to serve the house from Hillcrest.
Does anybody have any questions or discussion on that? Okay, does anybody want to make a motion to accept, to allow a house on proposed lot 15-14 to obtain access and frontage from Hillcrest Road?
Motion.
We have a second?
So this is just no change to anything. That's
Right, the driveway's already there, yeah.
Basically,
I second it.
Second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Post.
I
Yep, yep.
have a question.
Yep.
Was that just on 1514?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, variation number 3. Allow house on proposed lot 15-14-15 to obtain access and frontage from Route 3A. I'm going to read that again. Did you point to it? I'm sure they did. The 3A one, right?
That this is the lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so allow the house on that's proposed, lot 15-14-15 to obtain access and frontage from Route 3A. Do we have anybody that would want to approve that?
Did we, so is, I'm confused.
Okay, so
with
we
this one.
handled the first 2 variations, right, up near Hillcrest Road. Now we're going on to the
Because
lot.
this one isn't connected to the cul-de-sac.
Right, it's not
also.
connected to the cul-de-sac. So it has to have its own entrance off of 3A. So if nobody wants to make a motion, what do we do?
Or you could ask for a motion in the alternative.
What does that mean? To say no?
Motion.
If
Deny?
nobody wants to make a
I've
motion
never
to
heard
approve,
that.
does anybody else want to make a different motion?
Okay,
If not,
Well, the alternative to this is they go build a cul-de-sac there.
Possibly, right?
Well, no, the alternative would, they'd have to obviously put a site plan together for that and then bring it back. I mean, I guess at our point, to James's, discussion was, do we make a motion that they have to come back with more documentation as to why this is going to fulfill the master plan?
shame with you.
I mean, I'm convinced that a cul-de-sac has more impact than a driveway.
But that's not before us tonight.
I know.
That's what you said, we have to do what's in front of us.
We agreed on the 250 feet.
Yeah,
But we also agreed on allowing 2 extra houses on Hillcrest.
so is there any discussion on this? Any more discussion or I mean, we're trying to help the applicant, obviously, but can people postpone this to think about it, or we can make a decision tonight?
yeah, I mean,
Either one.
any member of the board could choose to make any motion that you feel is appropriate regarding this. You could also choose to table this issue. You could choose to table the application. You could
Make
continue
a
it.
motion to deny the variance.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
To deny the variation, right?
Deny the
Variation, I'm
variation.
Yes.
So we have a first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those who oppose?
Aye.
Anybody to abstain? Okay. Was that 411? Do you want us to continue with this last one? Or, does it make sense?
It's up to you. I think the applicant has conceded that I think the last one is for the 250.
Right, unless do you want us to get this on the record about the 250 setback, or? Do you want it on the record so you, want me to read it?
No.
Okay. Are we gonna continue with number 7, review and act on any waivers or continue to a date and time certain?
Yeah, there were 2 waivers that were requested. One, I think
Okay, they're
arguably
right
isn't
here.
necessary, but there is one.
Oh, the
that
internal
we-
circulation plan? Do you want to act on these, or?
If we don't need it, we can withdraw that one.
Okay, and then the other one was 150.4, the traffic impact study. You want to waive that one as well?
Oh, no, I think we need that. I'd like the
Okay,
board to
would you
vote
like
on
to
that
do
if we
that?
could, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to act on this waiver or continue to a date certain subdivision regulation 150.4, traffic impact study. Okay. Do you really want to, I mean, do we need to discuss having a traffic input study, or do you want to just approve? They don't need to approve the variance?
You do need a motion, though.
Yeah, I know. All right. So does anybody want to make a motion to grant them the okay, I'm confused here. Not a variation. Waiver. On, let me see, regulation 150.4 traffic impact study. Does anybody want to grant them that waiver?
Question, so we're waiving them having to provide it because of where it's going to be? And because it can't possibly be any traffic impact, is that what we're saying?
Yeah. So do we have a motion to waive the traffic impact study?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 600. Approved. Okay, next we're going to close the public hearing and act on approval.
Well,
Addition- Yeah, oh, go ahead, sorry,
It
go
would
ahead.
have to be continued, right? Yeah, we're gonna respectfully request to be continued.
Okay.
So that we have a chance to review the variations that were voted on, the waivers, and to make revisions to the plan and resubmit. prior to a vote.
Was there a reason you didn't want the internal circulation plan?
I think that I asked for it. I was just being over thorough. I don't really think I needed it for a
It's required
subdivision.
under the subdivision
Okay.
regulations. It is required under site plan.
Okay. So our next meeting is what? To get my calendar out. I have it here. Good mind, really? Is it November 4th? Is everybody- What is it? Fifth.
We have time.
Halloween is on a Thursday. The next meeting is November 5. November 5th? Is that what you'd like to come in? November 5th, or would you like to come in after the next, the
No,
19th?
November 5th, please.
November 5th. Okay. Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing, yeah? We're all,
I think we need a motion to continue.
oh, okay, I'm sorry. First time running a meeting. I'd like to make a motion to continue on a time certain of November 5th, 2019 at 7:00 PM at the Town Hall. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. 600. Is that it? Okay, end the meeting officially? Oh, no, we have more to do.
We've got
Never
some
mind,
other
we have our
business.
transportation chapter. We're going to probably waive that. Thank you. See you on November 5th.
You do have minutes.
Yep, we have the minutes.
Yeah, yes. Mary, you email me your statement tomorrow?
So we're going to,
Good night.
sorry, Lou. Nice report, though. You might be doing another one.
The good news is that the stuff that I had come up with were mostly technical corrections, make the plans,
Right.
speak the right language.
Yep.
Or if you want.
Oh, as usual. I can tell everybody you're the E.F. Hutton. When you speak, we listen.
Thank you.
Take care. See you later. Okay, so agenda item number 3 is the Transportation Chapter Master Plan update, if time allowed. Yes, so we're going to postpone that.
Thank you.
Do I need a motion for that?
I think it's okay. We can pass it.
We can pass on. All right. The next section is committee reports. Does anybody have any committee reports they'd like to speak about? Okay.
Well, I went to the NRPC.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome, actually.
Isn't it?
I like going. And you mentioned you can have 2. You're on that.
I think based on population of the
Is it?
town. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
have 2,
you
right?
get 2 and there's only 1 now, so there's a vacancy.
I would love to be part of that.
Is that the selectmen approve them? or-
Yeah, so the board nominates and the board could vote to nominate you and then go to the selectmen for appointment.
Okay.
So would somebody like to make a motion to approve that you are part of the NRPC? Member to go to what, the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll let it go.
recommendation to the
Okay,
board.
so we want Joshua Smith, right? We want Joshua Smith to go in front of the Board of Selectmen, right?
So moved.
We have a
Who
first.
said that, James?
James, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Abstained? 600. Can he vote for himself? It's kind of a conflict of interest there. All right, Joshua, good. So isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
It really is. I
Yeah.
missed them. Anyone else have committee reports? All right, I have a couple. The Heritage Commission is quiet. We've posted online our bylaws, our demolition ordinance 1040 that the planning board came up with, the demo ordinance flow chart, and all our approved meeting minutes. We're finally up there and official online on the town website. The Historical Society, all 5 buildings that we wanted to ask owners' permission to get onto the New Hampshire State Register to be looked at, to be approved by the state. All 5 have said yes. We have 4 that have actually signed off, and we're hoping to get the last one tomorrow night.
So the school did? School
They did. Yeah. And then I was going to ask about the NRPC meeting. So you actually did that. All right. Next section is to approve the September 17th minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read them, or you don't have access yet, right? Do you have access now? Okay. Does anybody have any updates they would like to add, or do they think it's all right? Or any?
Move we approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's 5 of us. No, 0 abstained, 1. Oh, you can't vote. What am I saying?
So 6 or 5?
I think it's all 6, right?
6.
1, 2, 3, 6. All right, and any other business?
Move we adjourn.
Does anyone want to second that?
Second.
Aye. All right, thank you very much for staying for the planning board meeting of October 15th, 2019. Good night.